Hey, everybody. How's it going? Hey, Jordan and I are here. We're back for another episode of the Sean Donahue Show. Family, parenting, good vibes. Jordan, how you doing, man?
Oh man, doing so good after a beautiful weekend. Weather's getting nice. We're recording this in the springtime, so we're starting to get more and more outside life going on. And my allergies are killing me.
Allergies.
Gosh.
There are springtime, so much to be thankful for. In the spring, it's a sign of a new season and new life, and new things are coming out. I just love being here with all you that are listening, you fellow moms and dads, here with this awesome man named Jordan Steele. I just love being here. And today we have a hot topic, a topic that every one of us can relate to. I think everyone's going to laugh and cry and get a lot of education from this episode. Jordan,
education.
Let's talk about boundaries in parenting and family life.
Yeah. So today's topic is something that's so important to every relationship, right? Just your normal day life, whether it's you're going to work every day and people are quote unquote walking all over you. If you've got kids, you've got family problems. It could all maybe stem down to what are the boundaries like within your home and around you as a person. And so without healthy boundaries, you're probably not going to have healthy relationships.
Well said. I like how you just kind of parse that. They all stem down to it is so true. I totally agree. So many of our problems in life and parenting and family and our pain come down to boundaries. I don't have boundaries with this freaking person or these kids, or what do I do? Or how do I get through to this? Or how do I get people to honor my boundaries? Well said, man.
Yeah. And I think one of the problems too, is I think about this often, and we'll probably get into it throughout the podcast, is like, we assume a lot. You know, it's like, why do they do that? Don't they know better? Or don't they? It's like we think they should read our mind, but they might not have any idea what our own boundaries are.
Oh my gosh. If you ask 10 people, even what are boundaries? What are they? How would you describe them? You're going to get 10 different responses, right?
Yes, you are.
I mean, even when we were preparing for the show, talk to me about that.
Yeah. So I went around and asked, I asked a couple of people just locally, what do you think boundaries are? What do you think boundaries are? And I actually grabbed the phone, recorded one. And this is what this lady I work with, her name is Kelly Cass. Okay. And she has this idea about boundaries. All right, Kelly. So when it comes to boundaries in a family atmosphere, what comes to mind?
I would say TV in their room. No TV in their room, especially when they're trying to get their homework done. No distractions, which is kind of funny coming from a TV meteorologist. So when the Weather Channel was on and their mom was on, that was okay. But anything else, no.
Okay, so boundaries would be more like rules for the kids that you're kind of thinking about.
Definitely rules have to be in place. The kids have to know their boundaries, and it's so important as they grow up, because once they leave the household, they start college, they need to know what's right and wrong.
There it is. Rules. So to her, it's rules, right? And that would be more of like, what are the boundaries like with your kids, or what are the boundaries like with your parents? When I think of boundaries, you asked me, several weeks ago, Jordan, when you think of boundaries, what do you think of? And, if I just have like an over-encompassing umbrella, I would say it's an agreement, a shared agreement with two different parties about a specific subject or a specific matter.
Fancy.
But it might not be like rules, or like if you do this then you go to jail, or whatever it could be, but it's more like, I feel like it's an agreement.
Okay, man. Yeah. That's why we're having this show, for all of us as adults to understand boundaries, to learn to articulate them and to set them. So just in preparation for this, I'm thinking, okay, as parents, there's physical boundaries, right? Regarding touching and not touching. There's emotional boundaries. And that's really the first thing I think of when I thought of boundaries. I'll explain that in a second. There's privacy boundaries, right? There's moral boundaries, right? Where we don't want our kids to cross different lines for morals and whatever.
Yes.
And then, of course, there's like maybe what I would call discipline boundaries, which kind of had to do with Kelly, I think, was referring to, which is kind of like rules. Like, this is the boundary. This is the rules of the house. Right. So tell me some more thoughts you have when you think about boundaries or getting your boundaries broken. What are some things that come up for you?
Well, I mean, that's hard. It can cause fights. It can cause broken relationships. If you've got let's say a significant other and your boundary has been broken, that maybe is an important one, it could lead to a breakup. I think for me, it's when a boundary gets broken, the feelings that come up are hurt, maybe fear.
Okay.
and sadness
Okay.
would be the three
Now,
because of
yeah.
many reasons. But
Now, when you're
yes.
thinking about you're getting your boundaries broken, who do some of the people you think of? Do you think of your wife? Do you think of your kids? Do you think of your own parents? Oh my gosh, how about that
Yeah.
one? Oh my gosh,
So,
that's a whole different episode. Or you think of
that-
work-related boundaries? A lame coworker or a boss?
Right.
Who do you think of, man?
You got to learn to say no to the bosses. I tend to first initially think of my immediate. So I think of my wife, I think of my kids.
Okay.
And then from there, I go outside and I think of my family. So just to get to one Jordan story,
Yeah.
let's just say I've got some family that have moved. I've in my career, just to give everybody perspective, I've moved basically every 2 to 3 years on average since I got out of college.
Wow.
And I've lived in like 5 different states.
Uh-huh.
And so me and my wife and our kids have been on our own a lot. And so now I'm in an area where family lives in my city.
Okay.
And I haven't lived with family in a long time.
Uh-huh. Yeah. Yeah.
So there are certain things that happen. And it's like an open door policy. Like they just think I can come over whenever I want because when we're together for the holidays, we're always together.
Right.
And you have a week together and it's just
Right.
there's no privacy because you're just spending a week and then you go back to your home.
Uh-huh.
Well, now that they live here, it's like those same rules don't really apply. We've never
Right.
talked about this, but you can't just show up in the afternoon at 4:00 when I'm doing dinner time, you know?
Right, man. Oh my gosh. Right. We could do a whole episode at least on this topic, man.
Yeah. And it's come down to having to have the hard conversations of trying to figure out what that is without hurting feelings. So I think that's a tough thing. Like if something's bothering you, how can we do it without confronting is always so hard to do. Like, I don't want to go confront that coworker about them walking all over me. Like they're my boss.
Right.
Like, or what if I go to HR and HR tells them like, I need to say yes all the time. And then you're not in a good mental headspace because you don't know how to stand up for yourself.
Oh my gosh. Right. And our lack of boundaries as humans, as parents is such a source of pain. It brings so much drama into our lives. Now, how about this? Our kids are never going to take a class on most of the most important lessons in all of life. And one of them is they're never going to take class on boundaries, how to set them, how to keep them, how to repair them, how to respond when someone breaks them. But we've never taken a class on that either, but we've also never taken a class on how to teach our kids boundaries. So that is what we're going to do here today. We're going to talk about boundaries. We're going to try to open some doors in your mind to get your imagination going. And I'm going to give you some tips on how to set boundaries. And all right, so here we go. When we do this, one of the things I like about our show is that we kind of talk about the past, the present, the future. So you can, if you have to think about this for a second, Jordan, that's cool. Let me know. But when you think about like your childhood or your life as a young man, do you have any stories about of interest or painful stories of how maybe your boundaries were violated or ways that you set boundaries with people? I know I sure do, because maybe it's because I think about this topic and I teach about it so much. You got anything that comes to mind for you? Yeah.
And I'm in a pretty good place right now. And as we record this, I'm in my mid 30s and I've learned a lot in terms of having to confront your own fear of being awkward and confronting someone if your boundaries are being broken. And it's a learning process. So I think this will be good for adults and kids and parents and the like. But I want to go back to the past. So there's 2 stories I want to share in this podcast. And one will come up later about my college time frame. Okay. And that's when I craved boundaries. But when I was in high school, it was so funny because like, for those that don't know, me and Sean were, friends in high school, so to speak. He was much older than me. He kind of helped guide me. And so I unintentionally set boundaries. And I didn't know that was the thing until I sat down and thought about it. Like I was the kid who was learning about God and going to church, but I was also on the football team and I was also somewhat popular. And so you're still in the crowd of like, people are talking about drugs or people are talking about, hooking up or people are talking about whatever it is. And you're trying to fit in, you're trying to be cool, but yet you still have your own personal boundaries that you don't really want to break. Yeah. But how do you do that when you're in school and you have to, you don't learn actual like book smarts in school. No. You learn how to survive on the streets.
I know, really. I know. Yep.
And so I unintentionally became known as the kid who was like I don't know what the terms were. Was it he's goody good, or
Yeah.
he
Okay.
doesn't smoke, he doesn't really go
Yeah,
out
like you were like
much.
the straight. Yeah, what are the terms?
Yeah,
Goody
just
goody, straight edge. You became
yeah.
known as the kid who had your moral boundaries with some topics, and you weren't going to cross those lines. Is that what you're saying?
That's it. But I never established them, other than me doing it just on my own accord. I never established them with anybody else, other than just
Yeah.
walking the walk. And I
Yeah, I
think
get it.
walking the
You weren't
walk,
super verbal about it. You weren't going
not verbal
around.
about it.
Oh, that
It
makes
just,
sense.
it was just a reputation that
Yeah, but you
became
had a
known.
vibe about you where I think your buddies honored your boundaries. They didn't pressure you, and
Right.
people didn't tease you for it. I'm guessing, right?
Yeah.
Yeah,
And so
yeah.
I unintentionally happened, and I'm glad
Uh-huh.
that happened, because I
Right.
whenever those awkward moments came about, like let's say for instance we were talking about something as little as smoking.
Okay.
Hey Jordan,
Okay.
you
Yeah.
know, and if they
Yeah.
ask you, it brings the up to the awkward moment, and
Right.
and it was kind of nice to have the boundaries where they just didn't even ask.
Oh my gosh.
You
Right.
know?
Yeah, man.
And so I didn't have
Yeah.
to really worry
That's
about it too
cool.
much. Yeah.
Right.
So that was kind of a
Hmm.
unique way that it happened.
Okay.
Throughout
Yeah,
high school.
man, those stories just get us all thinking about our childhood and our high school experience. It got me thinking too. I think one of the reasons why I'm so verbal about boundaries and so much of this topic is because I was so nonverbal back then. And you might even be surprised, maybe hard to imagine, but I was very verbal as a kid growing up, but it wasn't about like EQ stuff. It wasn't about feelings or connection, about relationships, about philosophy, about deep stuff like I like talk about now.
Yeah.
So I think for me, like, here's one thing I've learned. A wonderful way to think about boundaries, everybody, is think about boundaries, those orange cones that you set up on construction sites, right? We set these boundaries up, construction sites and we set these orange cones up in our lives. And it's like kind of like a way of saying, hey, this is the boundary. This is the line. Do not cross this line. But they're orange cones, so they're not that heavy. So we can move them. We can open them up, kind of like, we're at a fancy club with a little red fancy things. We can let people in and we can let people out as we want. But then what happens is that if people violate our boundaries, then they become kind of unsafe people, or they become unpredictable. So then we build walls, and walls are very unhealthy, generally speaking. Is there a time and a place to cut someone out of your life? Heck yeah, of course.
Yeah.
The problem is that if you go on social media, you see a bunch of these memes, Jordan. It says, I cut out toxic people. Like, there's no reason to have toxic people in your life. I cut you out. Like, cut the people out that are draining you. And that's actually pretty bad advice if you think about it, because who are you going to cut out? You're talking about cutting out your kids, your own siblings, your own parents. You can't just cut people out of your life. Like, that's a 2022 way of thinking. It's like, and I think what happens is that we end up building these walls. The reason we build walls is we build walls to keep people out. We build walls because we don't actually know how to set boundaries and to keep them. What do you think about that little word picture I just painted?
I think it's a great word picture, and it makes sense. So boundaries are a little more fluid, right? Because like the cone analogy, and that's where I was thinking when I came to my idea of what boundaries are. It's an agreement between two parties, and it can move. The boundaries can move. But my question is, it's really awkward to set those boundaries when it's time to set them.
Well, says who? It's awkward it's awkward because we never learned how to set boundaries.
We've never learned how to set
boundaries. And in
boundaries.
fact, who are the people that are supposed to be teaching children boundaries? Who are they?
Our parents.
Right. So think about this. Many of us that are watching this now, it's actually our parents who violated those boundaries. Or they lived in such a passive way or in such a wall-centered way, right? They either violated our boundaries or they built walls between us, or option 3, we kind of built walls between us and our parents, and our parents tried to come in and we didn't even let them come in. So there's this analogy can just go on and on, right? What do you think of?
I'm just thinking initially, right? So let's say, folks listening, and I'm kind of in there too, of like, okay, this is the point of my life where I'm learning about boundaries and I want to start to set boundaries going forward.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
So in order to get to the courage of maybe talking to my kids about whatever that topic could be, depending on the stage of life they're in, or the courage to go up to my coworker who's been walking over me for years.
Yeah.
how do I get to that point to where I know what I'm going to say and it makes sense to where it's not awkward and it doesn't create turmoil after that
You know what I've
conversation?
learned? Here's what I've learned in this work. Okay. I've learned that, okay, in about 15 minutes, we're going to get to the segment of our show called Ask the Family Coach. And I'm going to give you 3 actual tools to use.
Yeah.
But here's what I've learned, Jordan. I've been talking a lot about this the last 2 weeks. I'm glad I get to talk about it here on the podcast. I wrote a section in my book about it. Is I can give any parent these amazing parenting tools, like say this, don't say that, do this, don't do that.
Yeah.
But it doesn't actually matter unless you have the emotional availability and the emotional discipline to use these tools. It's the same analogy even you could use with being a famous meteorologist like you, or even like a first responder, like a cop or an ambulance. You can kind of know what to say and know what to do intellectually when you show up on the scene of like a disaster. But if you don't have the emotional availability or the emotional self-control to manage all the chaos around you, right, then you can't use those tools.
Right.
So I'm answering your question kind of in a weird way. I think we should spend a few more minutes talking about our past and the childhoods and about emotional stories about boundaries. Because to answer your question, what I'm trying to say is, if someone's ready to start putting up more orange cones in their lives, the first step would be to really think back to your own past. What has happened to you where it's actually, what is the stories in your life that's actually made setting boundaries difficult for you?
So the analogy in high school just came to me, right?
Okay.
I can't see myself going up to the popular kid in high school and saying, hey, we need to set up these boundaries, because right. I wasn't emotionally there yet.
Yeah.
I don't think that would.
No one taught you how to, no one. Yeah. It's not culturally relevant.
Culturally.
No one's ever taught you how to do it. And now I think nowadays kids are so different than us. I think nowadays, if a 15-year-old came up to another 15-year-old and be like, hey, I think we should set up boundaries, I think there's a good chance that modern 15-year-old will be like, okay, yeah, let's do that.
You think so?
I think there's a lot that would be like, I think there's a lot. I'm not talking like, over
I just
50%. I'm thinking under 50%, I'd be like, okay, yeah. Cause it's just especially in high schoolers now, there's it's such a thing now to talk about this stuff.
Well, that's good. That's good. I mean, I go immediately to the bully and then be like, why don't you talk to my fist? Or just something so cheesy, right? Like, why you stop being a little baby? Why you stop being a little girl about it? Just go suck it up or whatever.
Right. And that's super common of all ages. But I think it also has to do with the ages. I work with a lot of high school kids, and you haven't really been around them much since you were a high school kid. You'd be surprised at how many high school kids now. And this is actually kind of funny, where these modern kids will be like, talking about boundaries with their peers and like talking about like good communication with their peers. Yeah. But then they go back and they treat their parents like crap. It's hilarious. Like their parents could be like, hey, they're giving a speech at their club at lunchtime about boundaries. And then they go back and their parents are like, hey, we need to set up boundaries. Like, what, mom?
Right.
Mom. Like, so like for me, one of the first things I think of when I think about boundaries is we had this computer room in my house growing up in San Diego. I'm going to talk about this room a lot because I think looking back on my life, this room was very symbolic for me.
This was in your house or
in my house? In my house in San Diego, as a high school kid growing up, we had we called it a game room, a computer room. And I would go escape in this room and play Sega Genesis to kind of escape the real world and escape my parents. And it was like an orange cone place for me and people would honor, they would like, they would knock before they come. It wasn't even my own bedroom, but in a positive way, it was a place for me of like kind of just safety and protection. But in a negative place, it really wasn't a place of boundaries. It was a place of avoidance, really. And looking back on me as a youngster, I didn't have, no one taught me how to use my freaking words to set boundaries with people. And so I would run away. I would just build walls with people. Oh, you're dead to me now. You're dead. Oh, you're done. And I actually even, looking back on one of the most painful moments of my life is I had this deep, tightly knit group of friends in high school we called ourselves like the crew, and we actually got tattoos. We have matching tattoos together when we were 18. And then the story kind of goes like this, is that when we turned around 20, I came back from college and we were all living together, going to community college together. We were kind of, some of us were working in nonprofit together, campus life, working with teenagers. And they kind of started going in the direction of like partying. And I had kind of been through a year of that. And I was like kind of done with the partying thing. And really in back, what I should have done is talked, and we should have set up some boundaries as buddies. We were roommates. We were best friends. In the end, what did I do? I did something that I really regretted later. I literally just told the guys I'm moving out, and I built a wall and I moved out, and I didn't even talk to them about it. And I handled it so poorly. And it was like a breakup. Imagine like being a horrible. It was such a painful breakup. I ended up writing them all a letter, like 10 years later, apologizing. Hey, I'm really sorry for how I handled that situation, how I just left the group.
Wow.
And I just cut you all out. And I feel so much sadness and regret over it. I love you guys. I miss you. And I hope you're all well. And yeah, some of them contacted me and they say, I love the letter, man. Thank you so much. Some of them handled it super, super well. They're like, yeah, we understand we were on different paths at that time and we don't judge you for doing that. So yeah. So tell me a story about your
past. Hold on. I got a question.
Okay, man. Yeah.
I will move on in a second. So do you think if you handled it differently in that time, it would have worked out?
They would have handled it super well.
Now 10 years later, they do.
They were just great. I love these guys. Their names, some of these guys. Their name was Lance and Reed and Josh and Ryan and Mason. They would have handled it really well. I just did not handle it well. I should have set boundaries. Instead, I built a wall and I got into a car and I drove away. Yes.
Do you think you were scared that?
Yes.
Yes.
The answer, whenever you build walls, there's always fear in there. I was definitely scared of a lot of things. So sorry to cut you off. What's your question?
It was like, do you think you would have gone down that same path and you really didn't want to? So you're like, I got to get out. So you ran because you didn't want to go down that path, or?
Yeah. And I was afraid of that. I think mostly I was afraid of them not handling it well, or them judging me or scolding me. But
that confrontation that I'm talking about, it's hard. I don't like that. That's the hard part about setting boundaries. You have to have that moment of awkwardness.
Yes. And this is exactly why I wanted to talk about this, because that's a breakthrough. Setting orange cones up, that's emotionally challenging, man. It's freaking scary and awkward.
That is so weird. Would you have like called them all together in the living room and sat down and talked together, or would you have done it individually?
We actually had a culture of doing that. We had a culture. Yes, man. And I was actually one of the leaders of that culture. Every Christmas, I would write them a poem, a funny comedy style Adam Sandler poem. And I would read them. It was a roasting poem where I would roast them all. And it was like a love letter to my group of friends. And I would read it in the same voice, right? It would go like this. Welcome to Christmas. Here we are gathering together again. A bunch of buddies. The crew is ready to do some business. And it would rhyme. I would spend hours on this poem, and we had a culture. It was an amazing group of friends, man. And I ditched them and I screwed it up. And now they actually still vacation together. They go on and with their kids and their wives, and I'm not there. Because I moved on and they moved on. And it's, to be honest, it's a source part. It's a regretful part of my life. And I don't really get that when people say I have no regrets. Regrets. Like, I have regrets. It's okay to have regrets. I have a ton of regrets. I don't dwell on them. I've moved on. I'm super happy with our friendships now, and I'm happy they're happy,
Yeah. Well, for me, it would be a situation where, okay, so I would say, let's say college. Paint the picture in college. You're there with your high school sweetheart. You guys went to college together, and she went into the sports world. She got head role. It's a cheerleader. She was the captain, and she led their team to Vegas and nationals, and they placed up on the top of the charts. It was really great.
So cool.
And I was following my dream of, television and soon to be meteorology. And so we were still definitely strong in our relationship together, which was great. But at that time, she's in a field where it was a male and female cheerleader teams.
Oh,
The guys would throw the girls up, they would twist around. And so they were obviously getting a lot of attention, and they all knew about me, which is great. And there would be parties, and I'd make sure I was very much known because, you know, in that industry, it's just like, oh, well, are you single? We're going to get together. So there are times when, like, I wish there were more boundaries set. And I don't know how I could have done that other than going to each person on the team individually and talking to them.
You're talking about okay, you're in love with this. You're in love with your girlfriend at the time. And you're talking about, let's get juicy here. You're talking about a cheerleading culture. So guys are putting their hands on your girlfriend. They're maybe grabbing her, like putting their hands even on her butt. They're lifting her up high.
Yeah, I don't mind that. When it's stunting, it was all good. Let me give you an example. Yeah. So one day I was working in the facility that they do cheerleading in, right? Okay. And so I'm cleaning up. It's after hours. They're doing their practice, and I come out to look, and like one of the dudes is like standing up next to my girlfriend and giving her like a massage, like not just like, let me work out.
Oh yeah, massage. It's like,
let me give you
that's classic cheerleader culture. I mean? Massage.
Yes.
Now, you know, some of these dudes though are gay, and because that's part of male cheerleading culture.
This one was not, but yes. Okay. All right.
This one was not. All right.
And so we locked eyes, and he looked up at me as he was doing it, and he saw, and he let go, and he took 3 steps back. Like, I got caught.
Yeah, good story. You got caught. But did you give him the look? Like, what the heck, man? Why?
Yeah, I was just staring at him like, what's going on here?
Yeah, right? Man, that's a violent. Dude.
So like, so therefore, was there a boundary set there just now? Or do I have to go and physically talk to the person?
Well,
and be like, hey,
that was a nonverbal boundary. But I mean, there's another person in this story that really you need to have a talk with.
Oh, did 100%. But it was like,
that's
your
girlfriend. You're
correct.
Right.
Correct. That was the first person you go to. That's the first person you go to. But really, my problem is with the individual there, or some of the guys there, instead of her.
Is your problem with him, or is it with her? Because she's the one that allows. She might have even asked for it. Who knows?
Well, in that world, it was just like, it's like you said, guys are touching girls all the time. They're in a very physical. It's like being a dancer. If you're a dancer, for sure. Your touching is happening all the time. But how do you know when is it electric and when is it just?
It makes me think of San Diego beach culture. San Diego beach culture, what Jordan and I were raised in, is so different than regular culture. The way you talk, the way you think about nudity, the way you think about skin and bikinis and low-cut shirts, the way you think about even going to the bathroom in public is not the same way of how normal people think. It's a totally different culture. And this makes me think of culture as a culture of cheerleading. And even like, there's a lot of people listening to this now that even have, that's probably a hot topic for a lot of people is coworkers, boundaries with coworkers.
Yes, that's a big one.
That's a huge one. Fear of like, and this is why we could even do a whole nother episode on this. Like, I've learned a lot about boundaries from my friends who are traveling salesmen and saleswomen. People that travel for a living, that is a very challenging world for a lot of reasons. And one of them is flight attendants, boundaries, people going to bars at night, by themselves because there's nothing else to do, or with their coworkers who are big drinkers, but they're not. Let's say one of them's opposite sex, they're just divorced, or they're a swinger, or all this stuff. Right. You know, this is the real world we live in. And this is kind of why we're having this because it's really, obviously we're going to focus on setting boundaries between us and our kids here today. But the more we can understand and raise our EQ about the wide width and the depth of boundaries, the better we'll be able to set them with our kids and with others. Right. This is why we wanted to have Jordan and I wanted to have a segment on this podcast where we kind of open up the doors and see what comes out.
So I just wish we lived in a world where it was understood, boundaries understood. We all have similar boundaries. Let's respect them. But that's not the case. And so it sounds like what we have to do is be very verbal all the dang freaking time with people so that boundaries are understood from every angle.
Well, you know what? And there's another, listening to your talk, I even thought of another area for boundaries. Okay. So how about this? So one of my best friends, his name is Josh Meyer. Love him so much. Very, very close. It's, he just recently moved out, to my city. He's in tech. So we got an amazing house on 10 acres in California.
Whoa.
And that is a big deal. And 10 acres in
Whoa.
California is a big deal.
Jeez.
And it's incredible property. And so boundaries, how about this? Privacy versus vulnerability. All right. So privacy versus vulnerability under the context of boundaries. So on one hand, I don't need to tell Josh some of my secrets. I don't need to tell one of my best friends my private life, right? There's a boundary there. I have privacy.
Sure. Unless you wanted to, but
unless
sure,
I wanted to.
Yeah.
On the other hand, privacy versus vulnerability, right? So if there ever was there will be a class in middle school and high school one day on boundaries. And hopefully they'll have a little segment about this, about privacy versus vulnerability. Some of us, we want to be vulnerable with our friends, with our spouses, with these people we love and trust. But we're afraid. We're afraid that they're going to hurt us.
I guess that's it. I'm an open book too with so many people. And I always wonder when they don't share stuff with me, I'm like, are they mad at me? Are they why are they being so quiet? Yeah.
Maybe I can't speak for every one of these people, but they're quiet because maybe they're afraid of being vulnerable with you.
Maybe. Yeah.
Maybe they feel like this is a boundary. I talk about this stuff with only my sister or my brother, not with my friend. Right. And so again, by just naming that, I don't have any answers here. I'm just talking about how incredibly deep this topic goes about boundaries.
So for someone like you who knows this and has exercised this with your kids, with your spouse, with any siblings, can you talk to us about how it's gone? Do you feel like you're being very open? You're teaching people? Are you too stingy? Are you too strict?
Stingy. I think probably right, because we never talk about boundaries in our culture. We don't know. We don't know what we don't know. We don't know how people view boundaries because we don't talk about it. Right.
Yeah.
So it's hard to compare ourselves. Right. On how I know for me, on one hand, I think I'm extremely open, very verbal, very vulnerable with the few people I want to be vulnerable with. Right. And open with. This podcast is an expression of both you and mine's vulnerability, because it's like we're talking to each other because we're looking at each other through a Zoom screen on a podcast, but we are purposely trying to be open and vulnerable to support and help others and to make a good show.
So you haven't heard any of those close people come to you and say, hey, Sean, let's not do the boundary talk today or anything like that? But
I have had some people in my circle and tell me, hey, this is, private. So please don't share this with anyone. Right.
Oh, okay.
You don't share this with your wife. Don't share this on your podcast. Don't talk about this with your sister.
Good.
Because I talk a lot.
Yeah. I talk a lot. I'm like, oh, you didn't want me to say that? I thought it was funny. I just said it.
I have gotten in trouble a few times for that. And it sounds like you have too.
Yeah. Well, that's just when you get into a chatty McChatterson like me, it's just like, oh, I want to share my life with everybody because it makes us closer. So let's talk. Right.
It sure does.
Yeah.
I think for me, I see myself though, as like, I call myself like a recovering avoider. Like I'm a healed avoider. Like I don't avoid anymore, but I still struggle with avoidance. It's like how I talk. And how does this have to do with boundaries? I think that for me, I was not like an open book. I was a closed book. I was walled up for so long. And now I'm enjoying just these orange cones so much. And I talk so much about these orange cones and I practice them. So I just feel I just feel really pumped up, invigorated when we talk and I'm in these places. And I think that the one person I'm continuing trying to like be even more and more open with is my own wife, because I think that it must be hard being married to me because so for example, I have a lot of boundaries in our home. Yeah. So because I talk about feelings so much in my work and my profession, I have a helping profession. Well, we all do. Every job helps people. So if somebody comes to me, like what happened this morning, and they want to talk about their feelings or they want to have conflict with me, I'm not super flexible. I'm not
what do you mean?
Like I just don't drop everything and just be there. So like, for example, this morning, literally a couple hours ago, I'm telling my wife this awesome story. This story of how we met one of our neighbors down at the lake yesterday. And I was down there with my 5-year-old. And they were a wonderful family. They had 6 kids, a lot of kids. They weren't all their kids. And the kids are all frolicking in the lake. They're going on these kayaks and they're going on these things. And this, I don't really know these people. I just met them. It's the second time meeting them and I'm chit-chatting with them. And they ask, would you like us to take your daughter on a little kayak trip? So I said, that sounds good. So I'm sitting on a lawn chair at the lake because we were just kind of hanging out in the water, and they take my little 5-year-old on a 10-minute kayak trip, right? Sounds good, right?
Sounds good.
So there were some major boundaries that were violated in this story between my wife and I. Are you able to pick up on them yet? It's a riddle.
Is it because A, you didn't ask if she was cool with it? B, did she have a life vest on?
Exactly. She has no life jacket.
Oh, that's a huge one.
Huge one. So I let her go on this kayak without a life jacket.
Can she swim?
No, she cannot swim. And so I'm telling Danielle this story casually, like I'm brushing my teeth. And yeah, I'm really, really into life jackets, into water safety, because as a captain of a pontoon, I'm like in charge. I don't want anyone to drown. I take my pontooning very seriously. It's true. I take my pontooning super seriously. And I'm like the scared one on the water. I'm like the one that people are saying, Sean, chill out. But no, like as the captain, no one's going to drown on my watch, because lakes are actually very scary. Like, if the kid 100%. Goes under, they're done. You can't see them.
Done. I know.
They're done. It's not a swimming pool.
So what made you say yes? Why were you so cool?
It just felt good. It just felt good in my heart. I trusted these people. They had a very large 2-person kayak.
So it's like a boat. Yeah. It's like a big, it's not going to flip over. Yeah, I know.
It's probably not going to flip over. They just seem like, this is the second time I've seen them. I saw them engaging, and they're not going deep. They're not going in the ocean. So anyways, I made the decision, and this was a big withdrawal from the wife's trust bank. And so she wanted to talk about it. So I said, okay, so I'm trying to talk with her while I'm brushing my teeth, while I'm getting ready. It's not going well. I said, okay, Danielle, let me go get a cup of coffee and let's sit down and we can process this together. So that's what I did. So this is a story, and it went very well. It went very well. We got reconciliation, healing. She can trust me. I'm not going to do that ever again with our 5-year-old who can't swim. And essentially it's about boundaries, where she wanted to just come and start talking to me, and I just wasn't having that, because I had a boundary. And that's kind of like how we talk about our boxes too, especially many men. We live in these boxes, and for us to move out of the getting ready for work, brushing your teeth box into now dealing
emotional
with
box.
Emotional box is very hard. And for me, and I do it for a living, so it's hard. So what do you think about this topic, or what comes up for you?
I have multiple questions, but I don't think you can answer these questions without giving us specific tips. Okay, man. Yeah. On the tips on how to create boundaries. So let's go through the tips.
Okay, dude.
And then I have more questions about
let's do it.
Failing boundaries. Okay. So this segment is called Ask the Family Coach. And we're going to ask Sean easy tips on how to actually successfully do this, because like I've been saying, I don't like confrontation. It's awkward. So what is step 1?
Okay. So step 1 is to really have mindfulness about this. Like, what is happening inside of you if a topic has come up, whether someone's upset at you or you're upset at somebody. And we've given a lot have come up today. So I'm sure you're already thinking about some topics about boundaries. I added a new one to the list. So we have physical boundaries, emotional, privacy, moral, discipline. And then in the case of the life jacket situation, Jordan, it's almost like a teamwork boundary was violated. Like,
that's a big one. Yeah, because think about divorces. Like, boundaries are being violated. All the time. It's not immoral. It's not immoral for me to put my kid on a kayak with 2 nice people without a life jacket. It's like a teamwork. It's almost like she trusted me to make good decisions with a 5-year-old at a lake, and I kind of broke the teamwork vibe. And so there's probably, if we probably thought about it, we're probably keep adding to this. So here's 3 things to come to mind. Here's 4 things to come to mind. So the first would be mindfulness. Just ask yourself, what's happening inside of me? Like, does this have to do with my own
childhood? What was triggered inside of me? Why is this bothering me so much?
Why am I so frustrated going to work every day? It's because this coworker keeps bothering me.
Right.
And I'm angry. I'm frustrated.
Why is my wife so upset that I travel and go in hotels with people? Why is, my wife doesn't need to go to freaking therapy to find out why she was upset at me for putting her kid on a kayak with two kind of strangers without a life jacket. Like, right? It's kind of obvious from a different point of view, but so you have your own beliefs and they do. So then when after you're ready to move on, here's 3 action steps. All right. The first one is, I love this action step. I love it, is to use the word boundaries in your home a lot. A lot. And I'm going to give you some examples, and I want you to give us some examples. So every home has words that we use more often than others.
Yeah, I've never used boundaries. I don't think.
Practice. Like, when's practice? What's for dinner? Super Bowl. I'm tired. I'm hungry. What's for dinner? Or what's for breakfast? Don't do this.
Say
don't
please.
do that. Everybody, every home. So I'm encouraging all of us to make boundary and trust, that's for a different episode, common words you use in your home. Makes sense, doesn't it?
It does. It's not the first thing that comes to mind, but now it does. Like, especially if I want them, start using the language.
So here's some examples. Hey, excuse me, do not come into my bedroom. This is a boundary. If you like to come in my bedroom, you need to knock first and then wait for me to open the door. That's an example.
Okay.
Here's another example. Hey, sibling, you cannot touch other siblings. This is their boundary. You can't touch other people. There's like a boundary here. Imagine a wall. You can't punch them. You can't touch them in the privates. You can't, this is a boundary.
Yeah, we teach that. We just don't say boundary. Yes. Okay.
Right. So if you could think of an example where you might
use the
word.
I'm thinking of like, it would be eating dinner, getting kids to eat their whole plate. That's not a boundary, right? That's like a rule, or what would that be?
It sounds like maybe a rule. A boundary would be like maybe not bothering other people at the dinner table.
Okay.
A boundary could be verbal. So what a lot of families have is sibling issues where a sibling is going to bully or tease somebody, and then a parent's going to react, and they're going to either do some reactive parenting, or they're going to do, what I teach in the Parents Club to address that through the heart. Really building that heart talk connection is really the key to solving any problem parenting issue, whether your kids are 2, 12, or 22. So you could say, look, say something like this. Hey, I know we're having dinner right now, but I'm just really, really bummed out about what I just heard. This family dinner is a time for us to come together as a family, to love each other, to be with each other. And I feel like you're violating this boundary. Like, this is a time for us to be positive and to support each other. So please do not use your words to break this vibe. Or you could say it more directly. Look, when you say this to your sibling, it's like you're crossing the line. There's a boundary here. We don't talk to each other this way in this family, and you crossed it. Right? There's a gazillion ways. Anything come for you of how you might use boundaries in your home?
I was thinking of like, as the kids get older and they become teenagers, like when it comes to, let's say, driving and having other kids in the car, or making sure you're home at a certain time so that, you are allowed to go out on your own and explore and learn, and don't break the boundary of trust. So that
here's how that might sound out. Here's my sound, right? So, okay. All right. So honey, I'm going to let you go to this concert with these people because I trust you. You're 16. I want you to be able to feel free to live your life as you want to live it. I don't want you to feel controlled. See, I'm using, feeling words right here. There's no lectures, no pep talks, right. But honey, there's got to be a boundary here. And I cannot have you, I just don't feel comfortable you driving. I feel like comfortable having you drive this far, but not that far. It's just, I'm not ready for that.
Yes.
So there's a boundary here. And how about we'll have this talk again in 6 months. And
maybe we can change it.
I think you'll be ready to drive further or do this other activity, but this is a boundary. How about this? Here's one. Let's do some role playing real quick. All right. So you're going to be a 12-year-old kid who
Yep.
kind of wants to play soccer, but it's not really sure if he wants to play on the soccer team. Okay. So,
Okay.
son, daughter,
Hey, Dad,
do you want to
can
play
I go?
soccer?
Can I go? Yeah, sure. That's yeah, that sounds good.
Okay. Now, before we sign you up, I think it's really, really important that we're on the same page here with soccer.
Okay.
Okay. So last year, you didn't want to go to some of the practices and some of the games. Do you remember that?
Yeah.
And we ended up getting a lot of arguments about that, talks, right?
It was so long and it was so exhausting.
It is.
I needed a break every once in a while.
Right. And I get that. But I want to have this talk so we can really talk it out. So we don't have these big fights or blowups. And I don't want to be forcing you to go to the games or, making threats. Like, I want us to be on the same page.
Okay.
So how does this sound? If we sign you up, I need to be able to trust you that you're going to go to every game. Maybe except for like one or two. Like if you're not in the mood to go into a game, I need to, then, we'll give you like 2 passes, 2 absences. I just feel like this is like a boundary we set up where you give me your word because you're 12. You're very, you can keep your word that you're going to go to these practices and the games. And we're not going to fight about it. Do we have an agreement?
Can I have bubblegum after every game?
Yes.
That was good.
Yes. I just feel like I want to talk it out, son, daughter. So we don't, we're on the same page, like win-win.
Yeah. Okay. Let's do it.
Okay. So we have a deal. You'll have 2 absences for games and we'll do 2 practices, 2 games. And now the boundary is set. Are we good?
Okay. Deal.
All right, so that's another example of how you could use boundary. It's like they know there's some flexibility because this is why so many kids thrive at school, well, they don't thrive in the home because school is very much a place of boundaries. The teachers set them, but there's also social boundaries where the kids don't act out because they're breaking social norms and they're going to get embarrassed, right?
Yes. That's really good. There's a commercial right now on, maybe people have seen it. It's for a truck and they're going camping in the woods and it's got the family in and this teenage girl brings her boyfriend and they're going camping and the father looks in the rearview mirror and sees that the boy tries to grab the girl's hand to hold her hand. And he goes, and so there's a boundary there that obviously struck a nerve with the dad. And the dad was like, hey guys, let me tell you about my truck. And since it's a truck commercial, he's like, look, I've got cameras here. I can see this. I can see that. Let's just say I can see everything happening in this truck.
Funny.
So no funny business. You understand?
Right.
Like, yes, sir.
So that's
good. Let's go have fun.
Yeah, that's funny. That's like the dad trying to maybe set up like a moral boundary. And that's why it's probably going to be highly ineffective because the daughter doesn't really maybe agree to this. And the dad's just trying to say, no hanky panky in my car, whatever. And this is why to thrive with boundaries, you've got to really engage your kids' hearts and to help them understand what's happening inside of you, what's happening inside of them, and understand how important it is to keep boundaries and then how you're going to respond if a boundary is broken. Super.
And that's what I want to get into. But in this conversation, it kind of sounds like the situation I was in where my question to you is, if your daughter brings home a boyfriend, are you talking to him about the boundary or do you talk to her and trust that she's going to keep the boundary because you also want him to know the boundaries? Yeah,
that's right. But you also have to understand too, like, how old is my daughter in this situation? Let's say the boundary.
Let's just say it's any teenager. Let's say 15,
so a lot of parents have a boundary where, like, if you have somebody of the opposite sex come over or someone your romantic interest is, you're allowed to hang out in their bedroom, but with the door open, right? That's a classic rule. That's a boundary that some parents set. And so, is it a rule? Is it a boundary? That's for you to figure out and to work out together as a team with your teenager. And that's why a big part of what I'm talking about with tweens and teens especially is to develop win-win agreements where you make the agreement. Is this going to work for you? Because, all right, when someone comes over Do you want me to talk to them about this boundary? No, Dad, don't talk to him. That's embarrassing. Because then if I do, I'm kind of violating her boundaries, because actually her friend, it's her friend, right?
Okay.
And so this is why it's so complex. There's so many layers of boundaries.
Yeah, I wouldn't have thought about that. See, I would have just said we need to go to the third party, make sure they're on the same page.
Right. This is
so
why
what happens?
Right. There's so many. That's why this is why there's so many, how about this? It's actually a pretty common issue where a teenager is going to be upset with their parents for talking about their teenager with their parents' friends. So it's like me talking to Josh or you about problems I'm having with my kids. Now, a lot of kids are not going to be cool with that.
Yeah.
This podcast is another example. My kids don't want me telling their private business on a podcast because they're 12 and 17. That makes sense, right?
Yes.
And if I were to do that, it's violating these young women's boundaries. Well, I
Correct.
can tell a 5-year-old, she's 5. She doesn't have these boundaries. I can tell you any business I want about her. She's 5. She didn't wear a life jacket.
Yeah, I just mean for any parent out there with kids around that age in the teenage world, and they're starting to explore and go out more and stay out later, you could have that boundary set with them. But if we bring in a third party, a significant other,
right,
a love interest,
work it
how
out.
do you
exactly? Okay. You got to work it out. Win-win agreements.
Win-win. All right. So what happens when the boundaries get broken? Let's say you and your wife have this conversation about the kayak, and you're like, you know what? I don't agree. I think she's fine.
Right. The reason why you articulate boundaries, and the second action point would be to teach boundaries. Teach them to your kids. Teach about how complex they are, how many of them are out there. And then by talking about them and not teaching them, now you're raising kids who are comfortable talking about boundaries. Yeah. They are comfortable doing it because they've been used to do it. I say this to my clients a lot. Let's say a client plays soccer. About, can you kick a left-footed goal? Now, the time they reach, 11, a lot of them can say yes. But the first time you try kicking a goal with your left foot, it's very awkward. It's very uncomfortable, right? Just like a backhand in tennis or a left-handed layup in basketball. Anytime you're learning a new skill, it's going to be uncomfortable. This is the brilliance of talking about boundaries often, so that when your kids are 12 and they're needing to set boundaries with people and toxic people, or people want to use and abuse them, they're really skilled at doing it because schools won't teach it.
That's so true.
Right? Super deep right now.
The hard part though is adults don't even have the concept most of the time. It's just good we have this because it teaches people, because there's people out there, breaking boundaries all the time.
They sure are. Well, here's a couple of responses on how to respond. Here's what I found is that there's a word out there that I'm a big fan of the word. The word is violated. It's a great feeling word. In some situations, the word is so great to use and to share that feeling with another person. I'm feeling violated. In other situations, it's just too much. It's too extreme of a word, right? It's almost like saying that was traumatic. It's too much. Yes,
it's a
lot.
Lot.
Abuse is one of those words.
Yeah.
I'm feeling abused right now. That's too much. If you say that to somebody, you're probably not going to get a good response, right?
Yeah.
So here's what I found is that when you share feelings with somebody, Jordan, whether that word is I feel sad, I feel hurt, or something more extreme, like I'm feeling violated. This is why I'm a big fan of the word uncomfortable. Love that word. So let me model it for you. How do you respond when someone breaks your boundaries? Well, if it's somebody you want to keep investing in your life, you want to try to put orange cones up with this person using your words. If it's somebody you don't really care about and you don't want to give them a second chance, well then, build a wall with that person. So here's how you can build cones with people, depending on the person and the age. So let's do a little, if you want, we'll do a little role playing. You respond. So, hey, you'll be Sarah in this situation. So Sarah, I'm feeling really uncomfortable about what you just said and about what just went down. Can we talk about it?
Why? Sure, I guess.
Yeah, I'm just feeling my boundaries are really broken right there. It really kind of hurt what you just said and did.
Well, get over it. So I'm thinking of someone who would say it really harsh like
no,
that.
that's
Well,
exactly what people would say. Right.
Yeah.
So here's what I'm saying with this fork in the road. When you share your feelings with somebody,
Oop.
that person is a fork in the road in their life.
Yes.
And they have to respond. There's only two options. Either they respond in a way that sends a message to you. I really care about you. I care about your feelings. I care about your boundaries. I care about this relationship. Let's work it out. Let me learn and let me do better. Right. I got it. Like the kayak situation is a perfect example. I'm never going to do that again with a 5-year-old who can't swim.
Right.
Or they respond in a way that sends a message to you. They really don't care about your feelings.
Or you can get in, like, let's say your youngest was 10 and she swam just fine.
Right.
But your significant other still's like, I'm still uncomfortable with her going on a kayak by herself, or, you know.
So that's a, so
is
that
there
would
ever
be
a point where it's
right.
like,
So that'd be, okay, well, that's super common in parenting, especially where parents have different boundaries.
Yes.
And so that would be a time, we'll have a whole podcast on that. How do we develop win-wins with our spouses, right? On tough issues that you just cannot, you can't agree. There's a lot of stats out there. I think this saying something goes like this: 80 or 90% of the issues you have with your spouse, they're irreconcilable differences.
Right. Like I was thinking of the huge one that happened just recently that everyone can relate to, is with people who are divorced and married couples with their kids and the COVID vaccine. One maybe was for it and one was against it. And that's a boundary. Right. How do you get over that?
There's no gray there. You either get it or you don't. Like that's how a lot of these topics are. They're 90%. You can't change your spouse's opinion on the topic. That's their belief. And most of the time, those are not immoral beliefs. They're not like good versus evil. It's very gray, right? It's gray.
Yeah.
So going back, your best bet, how we do it, I'm coaching you here, is to speak from your heart. This is action step number 3. You speak from your heart and not from your head. Most people, they speak from their head.
Yeah.
And they try to convince somebody like, you can't do that. You're just wrong. That's not, what are you thinking? You sure that's right? Why would you even do that? That's ridiculous. Yeah. I don't even know where you're thinking about this. Why would you? And you try to convince. Why is it such a big deal? Scold somebody.
Yes.
And those are all what I teach is reactions. If you join the Parents Club, you're going to get this amazing set of tools, and you're going to understand the difference between actual really connecting, speaking from your heart versus speaking from your head and doing all this reacting. So isn't that what people do? They just want to convince and try to tell someone that their feelings are stupid or their belief is wrong. Isn't that what we do?
Yeah, of course that's what we do. And if it gets so toxic into a situation where like these two parties, you're sharing from the heart, you're trying to tell them how you feel and they're just not having it.
Yeah.
Do you move on? Do you let the relationship go away?
No,
do you try again?
No, you try, especially in parenting.
In parenting, you try.
No, in parenting, you try again. Sometimes they say, well, if you try again, then is it time to discipline? Maybe, but I would say try again, because think about it. I mean, if somebody is 15 or under, they don't learn things the first 3 times. Sometimes I get these ridiculous comments on TikTok. Pretty much every episode, I realize now, every podcast, I say this. I get some of the stupidest comments on TikTok. I get some amazing ones too. So listen to this. I don't know. Maybe you don't see this as funny. I do. Do you think this is funny? Somebody says something like, "I tried this with my kid. It didn't work."
Yeah, I'm glad people are trying.
Do you see the humor in that? What's the humor?
Yes. They tried it one time and
they tried it one
time. Yeah.
Sean, I tried using boundaries with my kid and it didn't work. So you suck. No.
Right.
Like this is one of the most complex human EQ skills of all time.
Right.
It takes more. It's in one time.
Not like
try 1
super
year.
glue. Right.
1 year. This is the thing. Like, here's what I love about this podcast, and kind of like what we do in the Parents Club and in private sessions. People come in and they just want me to solve problems.
Yes, of course they do.
They do. And I can show you how to solve problems. But really what happens then, you realize that you're kind of getting an invitation from me on this podcast to actually do deeper work on yourself.
Right.
Deeper work. What is happening inside of me that's making it hard for me to solve these problems? what is happening inside of me where I'm actually part of the problem here? Why haven't I taught boundaries? Why is it hard for me? How do I thrive in that? Because no one ever taught us how to set boundaries. So going back to answer that question and ask the family coach, one is mindfulness.
What's going on with you?
Yeah. What's happening inside of me? What am I feeling right now?
Yeah.
Next is use the word boundary a lot in your home. Make it normal. When your kids are honoring your boundaries, praise that effort, right? Say, hey, this meant a lot to me. I could really trust you to honor my boundaries. Thank you. Number 3 is to teach them to your kids. Look for those teaching moments. Because as we've already explored here, so much to be taught. And lastly, speak from your heart, not from your head. You can never convince someone or teach someone from the head about boundaries. You got to help them understand this is an issue of the heart. And using words like I'm feeling uncomfortable. I'm feeling unsatisfied. I'm feeling bummed out. I'm feeling sad. I'm feeling hurt. I don't feel good about this arrangement. It's a very effective way of inviting someone to honor your boundaries. And it really is an invitation because it's like in a little orange cone. And if they want, they can push through those orange cones and break them. But I sure wouldn't do that, because if they keep breaking them, they're going to send a message to you. They're not trustworthy. They're not ready to honor your boundaries, right?
So if you have, let's say you do this with your child at age 10 and it's now age 17, but they're going through a phase where they just don't want to know it anymore. They're done. And they don't honor your boundaries. Right. And you keep trying to bring it up and they still say no. Mm-hmm. What do you do other than set restrictions and discipline? How can I make it to where you come to an agreement if there is no 50-50?
That is so.
This is an extreme case.
There is no 50-50 in a lot of situations. There is win-wins. And we'll do a whole episode about being creative to developing win-wins with your kids. And I'll give you an example in a few minutes, not right now. I have one in the success stories. Yeah, well, here's some really good news, Jordan. Well, I don't have every answer in the book on parenting. I can tell you in 24 years of experience, I really believe this in marriage and in parenting, that there's always a win-win out there. There's a third way.
Okay.
A third way. I just really feel that way. And I have never been proving otherwise. Give me a situation and I'll show you the third way in it. Yes, some of them are complex, like black or white, like a vaccine you brought up. Very challenging, but there is a third way. And that's really important for us to really believe in, right? Because if we didn't believe in that, then we're going to build walls with people. We're going to give up, right?
We're going to give up.
It's like you're losing hope.
Correct.
Right. And that is the key, to use your feeling words to say, I'd like to really set up boundaries that work for both of us. Win-win. Can we do that together? And that's fairly inviting language,
Right. I think that's good. I think this is a good groundwork for people to start if they haven't started yet. And maybe they have tried before and they've given up. They need to circle back and try again and try again. 9 out of 10 businesses fail. So just keep going until you find the success, because if you give up, you imagine what you could be giving up. You could give up a relationship, a love.
If you have a child or a coworker who's not willing to work with you on your boundaries, well, there's something majorly wrong in that relationship. Like if it's a coworker situation, they don't want to honor your boundaries, or even a friend or an own family member, they don't want to work with you. Well, then that is probably a sign that it's time to build a wall between you and that person, right? If it's happening in a child, it's your own child, it's actually not a sign to build a wall, because that's stupid. You can't build walls between you and your kids. That's a sign that the attachment needs to be nurtured. The connection is off. And there's something majorly wrong in that. It's like the same way of saying is defiance. Defiance is a problem. Parents need special tools to deal with defiance. We'll do an episode on that. But it's really a sign that this relationship has been temporarily fractured. Yeah. And we need to reconnect this kid's heart to the parent's heart, so then they can do things like creating win-win around boundaries together.
I like it. That's really good. That's really powerful. And that's really helpful.
Thanks, man. Yeah. Remember, parenting is never about what it's about. So that's
the hardest thing to come to terms with, because I'm always focused on the surface. What is happening right? And I'm like, nope, go deeper. Sean says, go deeper.
Go deeper.
What is actually going on? I forgot you had half a cake before you came to this party. No wonder you're acting crazy.
Right. The kayak situation, with the life jacket was not about safety. Really what it's about is that my wife has nightmares sometimes about little nightmares about our bad things happening to our kids in water.
Yeah.
It was about
Wow.
trust. She wants to be able to trust me as a recovering crazy San Diego surfer dude to make good decisions, not like I did when I was a cat in the past, right? It's not teamwork. And that situation that happened yesterday on the lake was a violation of trust, boundaries, and teamwork. And I can't blame her for feeling that way. She's my partner. So I can't just convince her and tell her she's crazy. That would be stupid. I got to work with her. She is. I love her. I value her.
Of course.
So,
and think about all those people who had a moment of where you were and said yes, and something terrible has happened to their child.
Oh my gosh.
Right. And you know what I mean?
Yeah.
That is just, there's people out there and they've had terrible things happen. So it's good to talk this out.
So good to talk it out. You know what I also love talking out is our next segment, which is called What's the Deal, Jordan Steele. Is it time for Jordan to share his thoughts on something happening in our culture or our society, and for us to banter on it for a second. So Jordan, what's up, man? Tell us the story.
All right. So we're going to put a bow on this and kind of wrap things up. I thought this was kind of funny when we were talking about boundaries. For folks who are just tuning in for the first time, I'm a meteorologist. So I stare at weather maps all the dang time, right? I know the states by heart. I could list them all on a map if I needed to. But what has always intrigued me is the boundaries of the states. Since we're talking boundaries, I'm always like, why is it that most of the states are created with either parallel lines, right? You got the lines of longitude and latitude, and there's a lot of lines that are based off of the latitudinal number. But then you've got crazy squigglies, or let's say Nevada, right? It comes out at an angle, and in California, it doesn't go up and down. It kind of comes at an angle. Like, why
like a
is
triangle?
that
It's kind of like
is it like a triangle?
What does that
Who
look
drew
like?
that line?
Yeah,
and
right.
Arizona has one too. Like, why didn't they just come straight across? It comes up. So I think about this often. I actually got a book. It's Why States Have Their Shapes, if anybody's curious, and they go into each state, and there's a lot of history that comes with it.
Have you read the book yet?
Yeah, but it's so thick and massive. You just go to the state, and then they talk about every corner of the state and what was happening historically, if they moved it. Why does West Virginia have two panhandles? Why is the state of Georgia have this little notch next to Florida? So and it has to do with land purchases. For some cases, think about the Louisiana Purchase. That was a big one, right? Think about the Mexican-American War and the whole West and how that was created. But eventually, within the United States, we had to create our own boundaries, and a lot of them are done with, like I said, lines of latitude.
Yes.
And we also have a lot that have to do with rivers. But there was one thing that I thought was fascinating, because we could cover any state here, but down in Texas, way back in the early 1900s, gosh, I want to say it was maybe mid-1900s, maybe it was like 1967. We had this major hurricane, right? We're talking Cat 5. This thing was monstrous. And it was 50 miles from the mouth of the Rio Grande. And what happened is, after that storm went through, it created a small island right on the river. So think of a river and how it meanders up and down. And you know how a river can have a horseshoe bend, right? It comes up and around, and it almost touches. But then it keeps going. Well, this hurricane was so massive, it wiped out the horseshoe bend, and now you have this island by itself. Well, the island was supposed to be part of Mexico, but now the island it's not incorporated. No one's come through and said, this is mine. Mexico didn't say it. America didn't say it. So this dude from the Cherokee Nation was like, I want it to be my own independent country for my people. So he tried to go through all the documentation to become a sovereign nation of.
I think I might have heard about this guy. What state is that in?
This was down in South Texas, like
South
way
Texas.
down,
Got it.
way down on the Rio Grande.
Okay.
So anyway, that ended up, long story short, is that guy was going through, he got license plates, and I think he was like trying to create an embassy.
Oh my God.
And the government's like, no, this is not how we do things. Like, anyway, after years and years, it never came to fruition. But I just thought it was so funny how, when we're talking about boundaries today, when it comes to like our state's boundaries, our county's boundaries, there's a story with each of them, and they're fascinating.
They
if anybody
really
has any history and wanted to know what it was like to create those. And one of the things that they've done, Mexico and America, they've spent millions and millions of dollars of making sure the Rio Grande doesn't change course. Because
Really? Oh,
yes,
that would
because
change boundaries then.
if it changes
Because if it shifts
boundaries,
water, if you
it
move the water,
shifts,
yeah,
then the boundary
okay.
changes. And in fact, there's one case here. I have it in my notes here. Yeah, so the US and Mexico, they squabbled over 1 square mile of tract, 1 square mile for 65 years, trying to figure out who owned 1 square mile.
It's so interesting.
So they've got cones too, but
They
they're
got
more
cones.
sturdy cones.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. So I got two things that came up to me. Listen to that story about states and the boundaries. Can I share them with you?
Yeah.
Okay. The first thought, it's a thought, is blended families. Blended families live out what you kind of just described. Because what happens is you have a family that was functioning on its own, and then they, get remarried and they move in together, and now they're blended. And talk about a shift for everybody.
Oh, so much. So
big
true.
change. Everything is up in the air. So big fan
you have
of
family history.
Family history.
All this family history coming into this one couple.
So
so
if you have
tough.
a blended family, I really, really encourage you to start having family meetings. If you weekly family meetings, monthly family meetings, where you come together and you talk about boundaries, you teach them, you check in with everybody to see how's everybody going here, and you create win-wins together. I used to do weekly family meetings. We've had a season where we have not been doing them, but having family meetings is such a wonderful and effective way to develop harmony and create a culture in your home. And when problems arise, big problems, if you have a culture of having family meetings, well, then it's kind of like what you do. You come together, you sit down, you get some donuts and some bagels, and you talk as a family. Very effective.
That is very effective. For these couples that are going through this, there's a weight of, let's say your immediate parents, because maybe you've been going to them for advice all the time. And now you're in this new relationship where you're trying to create a new family, but you're hearing your mom in the background saying, meh, 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 or your dad saying, not supposed to do this.
Yep.
So, I mean, would that just go into just continue to meet and try to get through that? Set
boundaries with your own in-laws, your own parents.
Okay.
Set so many boundaries with people. Such a big fan of boundaries. Second thing I think of when you listen to Jordan's shifting of states boundaries is I think of teenagers. Yeah. This is it. I mean, teenagers are constantly changing. They're constantly growing. They're constantly making mistakes. They're constantly wanting more and more power. And this is, talk about a challenging human being to develop win-wins with, is a teenager.
Yeah, I know.
But this is why you got to use all these tools, everybody, that I'm putting in your toolbox to really work on win-win boundaries with your kids. Because giving your teenagers some cheesy screen contract or giving them some speech about, hey, this is the boundary, don't cross it, that's not going to work with teenagers. Yeah. They're either going to obey it out of fear, out of people pleasing, or they're not going to obey it and they're going to be straight up defying their face, or they're just going to sneak around it, and because they don't really agree to your boundaries. Right. So if you go about boundaries in a poor way, you're going to have lots of losses. If you go around these win-win conversations knowing, okay, what do I need to give up to negotiate with my teenager to get a win-win? Well, that is going to be good. And that actually leads me to our next segment, which is 30-second success stories. I'm going to actually tell you about one of mine. You have one. Can you tell us one of your success stories as we
Mine's really quick
podcast to a close?
30 seconds. I go in the field a lot. We cover hurricanes, tornadoes, and just recently going to the field. You work with different crews, and you work with different crews all the time. You got your producer, you've got your photographer, you've got people back at the desk at home base trying to tell you where to go. And so you have to really quickly adapt to your boundaries and those people boundaries when you've never met before to be in a professional work environment and get the job done. And so it's so interesting to see how many different kind of people are out there and what their boundaries are like. But my success story is identifying what their boundaries are as soon as I can and saying what kind of people they are so that I can adjust my own boundaries to be more fluid to create a very successful working environment that so far has proven to be pretty good, because as anybody knows, it could be tough being on the road. And if you have a confrontation with an employee, which I've had before, it's not pretty. It's tough.
Yeah. Well, yeah. I talk about traveling salesman. Yeah. You're a
Yeah.
traveling meteorologist and very tough. Yeah.
Yeah.
Especially you're stepping into kind of these chaotic storms where sometimes people are getting hurt or damaged or dying from, the craziness that you're stepping into. That's just another layer of intensity, I would think, from being you're not a first
Speaking of which,
responder,
yeah,
but you're in an intense scene.
right. And one other quick side note story. I was recently down doing some tornado coverage, and I asked this gentleman if, hey, they had a house smashed into their house,
Mhm.
right? I wanted to ask him a general question. He was not having it. I must have crossed some boundary because he got up in my face real quick.
Yeah. And he said, "Get the F out of my face."
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I'm like, in my mind, I'm like, well, technically I'm not doing anything illegal or wrong, or I'm in the right, but I noticed I crossed his boundary and there's no reason to,
That's kind of what these Karens are about, right? In 2022, everyone knows, like, I'm sorry if your name is Karen. It's like, if your name is Karen, it's like we just turned your name into like a bad, like a cuss word. What Karens do is they feel like their boundaries have been crossed or violated because they're ultra sensitive. And then instead of being quiet about it or just leaving, they point their finger at people or the world and they whine and complain. They feel like they're a victim or something, or someone crossed their boundaries and they're going about it in a really bad way.
Right.
And now they're getting labeled by everybody else as a Karen. Oh my gosh. All right.
So true.
My 30-second success story is very small, but in the last 7 days, my daughter and one of her best friends, they drove her older Toyota RAV4 into the big city of downtown Sacramento to watch two big concerts, the Billie Eilish concert, and there's a famous rapper named Tyler, the Creator. And these two, just 16 and 17-year-old, they went there and they made great decisions. They just did it and they lived their life. And I love it. I'm so happy for them. There's no masks. Gosh. They're on a concert. They're living their life, making childhood teen memories at these concerts. Apart from their parents, I trust them. They trust me. I'm so happy for these girls making memories.
Dude, I'm proud of you. I'm not there yet. I'm not ready for that for my kids. So one day it will be. Yeah, that must have been tough.
It's not tough because we worked together on our relationship, and it's she's gonna make bad decisions sometimes, and I can't. It's not my job to protect her. It's not. That's another episode. It's not our job to protect our tweens and teens. Nope, that is not our job at all. It's our job to coach them. It's our job to teach them, and that is our job. So,
I love that.
Thanks, man. Thanks for letting me. I'm really happy for her. And so, all right, here's a couple final words. We love to end our show with some words of gratitude. So Jordan, tell us something you're really thankful for, and then I'll share. And if you're listening at home, just take a second to take a deep breath and think about what are you grateful for today, and just to count your blessings and be happy for what you have. That is scientifically, medically proven to be so good for us is gratitude. So let's do it. Tell me something.
You want to hear something funny? Here's mine.
You know it.
I am thankful for turkeys.
Oh, why?
When I was
I got turkeys right outside my window right now. They're like a freaking pest in Northern California. Why?
We were out camping, woke up early. Everyone was sleeping in the tent. I started a fire. Sun has not even come up yet, and I hear a turkey gobbling in the distance. And I was like, "That is such a unique sound," and I feel so at peace right now. And so that is one of mine. I'm grateful for a turkey gobble in the middle of the woods while I'm watching steam come off the lake as the sun's coming up over the horizon with a cup of coffee. I thought that was the coolest thing.
Oh, a cup of coffee. Oh my gosh. I'm thankful for tacos, man. I love tacos. I barbecued tacos last night. I got some shrimp tacos, some chicken tacos. Oh man, I just love
How many days
tacos.
a week do you eat tacos? I eat it probably 2 or 3 times a week.
Oh, do you?
Oh man.
Like, where do you get your tacos from?
No, I just make tacos. tortilla, put anything in a tortilla and it's a taco. Like I'm fine.
Sweet, dude. No, like maybe that's why. Yeah. I'm on one day a week, one every 2 weeks. I barbecue a lot. So if I'm going to make tacos, I'm going to be barbecuing them. So
hard shell, soft shell, corn, flour.
I like the little white mini street tacos. Like
those
little
flour,
ones or the corn ones would be second best.
Yeah, those are good.
Yeah. What about you? What do you go for?
I go towards flour, but I'm trying to reduce my bread intake.
Right, because they're really bad for you, actually.
Right.
Like those mission tortillas, those got a lot of junk in them.
A lot of junk.
And they're not healthy. Yep.
So I'm going more taco salad.
Oh yeah. We're grown men. And who would have imagined we're having a podcast talking about taco salad in our old age? Hey, Jordan and I love our listeners. Thank you for letting us be a part of your life for this hour. Stay strong, everybody. Be close and teach wisdom. And we'll see you next time on the Sean Donahue Show. Thanks for joining us, everybody.
Bye, everyone.